If you have an interest in horses and love learning more about horses, the horse industry, teaching, or even managing your own horse business, then you're in the right place. We would love you to join us on our mission, which is to improve the lives of horses around the world through the education of riders, handlers, and trainers. So get comfortable, listen in, and enjoy.
All right, welcoming back Diana Waters today. And today we're going to talk with Diana about working in walk, which is not something that we often do. We often sort of are in a bit of a hurry to get into trot and canter and jump and everything else. So Diana's going to go through working in walk, and she's done a lot of training, French classical dressage. So she's going to use these principles to teach us about working in walk. Now, Diana, are you there? Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Glenys.
Good to talk to you, Diana. But before we get started, just want to remind people about the mission of International Horse College, and that's to improve the welfare of horses around the world through the safe education of their riders, handlers and trainers. And if you're interested in this mission, which is, about the welfare of horses through the safe education of riders, handlers and trainers, then have a look at the wide variety of equine courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Just go there and scroll down to the courses that you're more interested in. Now, Diana, working in walk. We often don't talk about working in walk, do we? We just talk about, let's get going in trot and canter and push them forward, and now we'll start to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And walks almost becomes a bit of an afterthought that we just don't think of much. So tell me about French classical dressage. How did you become interested in French classical dressage?
I think that's a really great mission statement that you've got there, and I think it's really well aligned with what we'll be talking about today, so that's good.
Good.
So I think I rode as a child, as many of us did, sure. And I just really rode for joy. And I loved horses and riding, and I decided to go and do my instructor training. But I found that somewhere along the line there, I just kind of lost a little bit of the joy, and I found that the work started to become a bit more mechanical, sort of to use increased force, and horses were losing their individuality and joy. So once I was qualified, I decided to go and search and see whether there was a better way, and that's when I met Heather Moffat. So Heather uses French classical methods, so that was my first introduction, and she also specialises in rider position and synchronization. So when I went to watch her ride and train, I saw her and her students just looking absolutely beautiful on these horses, and the horses looked happy and harmonious, and they had that same joy that I'd experienced riding as a child, both the horses and the riders. So that really attracted me to French classical, and I went and did some further training with Heather, and I was particularly impacted by the benefits of the walk work that she does. And I was quite amazed by how much it improved the horses in all gaits. And I experienced something called school walk while I was with Heather. And school walk is a beautiful, lofty, slow motion walk where the rider moves in complete harmony with the horse and influences them using invisible aids. So it really just looks as if the horse and rider are gliding along. And I got to experience that riding one of her school horses. So one of my very favourite things to do while I was at Heather's was to ride one of her horses in school walk, and to go through the lateral movements, so the leg yield, the shoulder in, travers, half pass, all of those sorts of things. And before, I'd never experienced in this way how you can actually just go through those movements without having to think about pushing a leg or correcting with a hand or what you're doing with your weight or your seat, because you're so connected with the horse in the school walk, and the horse is so super focused on you that it almost feels like you just think the direction you want to go in, and that's where you go. So then I returned to teaching in Australia and tried out the exercises in walk with various horses that I was schooling, and started to teach it to my students as well. So really reducing my aids to a whisper and allowing the horse to slow down as much as they needed and to process. And I found that in nearly all the cases, I could see really profound improvements to all of these horses from all walks of life that I was working with. So since then, I've been absolutely passionate about French classical, and it's really the walk work has really underpinned all of the work that I do with horses in various disciplines.
Say you've got two friends talking, as you always do, and someone might say, oh, I've heard about Diana Waters. You know, she does a lot of work in French classical dressage and working in walk. But if the next person said, well, what makes this so different? What makes your way of working horses different? You know, is it the connection? Is it something else? How would you explain that?
I think a lot of it is, yes, the connection, but a lot of it is about the fact that I meet the horse where they already are. So I really start off by taking off all of the aids, removing all of the pushing and pulling and trying to get the horse to change and just meeting the horse where they are. So I'll typically start with, before I even begin work, I start with just checking where I am and making sure that I'm relaxed and smooth in my movement, that I'm breathing, that I'm grounded and regulated. And I always begin walking around with the horse just on a long rein with the in-hand work. So this work is in-hand and ridden. I usually begin in-hand and just literally walking next to the horse and matching my footfalls to the horse's footfalls and just trying to find a place where I feel like I'm at the same place as the horse, not asking the horse to go faster or slower and just meeting the horse where they are. So whereas with the way that I was always taught was get on and go, and especially with my instructor training, I was all, you know, you sort of get into a lot of trouble if you were seen to be dithering around.
Yeah, especially doing some work in, I'll just do some work in hand work first. It would be.
I don't think that would happen. But even with the ridden work, we would, and sort of especially obviously exams are a very tricky situation because the examiner needs to see what you can do in a short space of time. So it's a very artificial situation. But I think because of that, you ended up it sort of filtered down to the lessons as well, where you would get on, you might do a half a round of walk, and then you'd be expected to trot off and be working your horse. So my approach just slows things right down, starts with connection and self-awareness, starts with meeting the horse. And then you actually see a shift in the horse when they realize you're not going to start bossing them around straight away. You see them start to open up a little bit, and then you can start to make little suggestions. So the way that you ask is different because you make a suggestion. Like you might say, can you bend towards me a little bit this way? And then you give the horse time to process. If the horse doesn't do it, you don't get after them and say, come on, I asked for this. You give them a little bit more time. And then when they do it, they actually get to experience how it feels in their body. And you can see that. And that's part of the reason why it makes such profound differences, because if what you've shown them has helped them, they start to realize that you're helping them to move in a way that feels nice. So then they start to become super focused on you. And that's when you start to be able to use those really subtle aids and things like that. So interestingly, since I started working in this way, I have never encountered a lazy horse again. So often the first session will be very, very slow with a horse that's sort of previously been labelled as lazy. But usually quite quickly towards the end of the session, and we do a lot of stretching as well. So I'll ask for something and then I'll release it and allow the horse to stretch. But towards the end of the session, you'll find the horse is suddenly, despite sort of being allowed to slow down or even asked to slow down, suddenly they're wanting to go more forward. And that's partly because you've taken the pressure off, and partly because when the body is aligned, it's able to move more forward and to flow a lot better.
Yeah. So obviously you're finding a lot of benefits of working your horse in walk. You know, and I know you've talked a lot about the benefits, but not specifically clarifying. Have you got set benefits if you were talking to someone to say, well, the benefits of the horse are this, you know, just so they can sort of understand, because different people are going to get different benefits, you know. So say someone who's too scared to canter, you know, too scared to trot, like they don't feel comfortable. This would obviously be good for them to build up their confidence. But do you have like a list of benefits if you were talking to different groups of people that you could clarify there?
Yes, I think, as you say, the benefits are far-reaching, and there's probably sort of more than I could go on for hours about this. But I can
obviously very passionate. Yeah,
I can summarise it in 5 points, I think.
Okay, that'd be great. Yep.
The first one is that it improves confidence. And when I was listening to your bit about what you were aiming with what you do, the safety, and I think confidence comes into safety a lot. So when I said about the confidence, I was thinking about the rider, but then I thought actually the horse as well, because by slowing things down and allowing time to process, it allows the horse and the rider to address any of their fears and also to stay well within the threshold, well under the threshold of being afraid. So working in walk, and especially starting from the ground as well, you build the connection and you can try little things in a way that doesn't feel unsafe. So if you wanted to try something new when you were in trot or canter and it's not working and you make a mistake, that could turn into a dangerous situation. But in the walk, there's so much time for you to see if something is working or not. And both the rider and the horse having confidence really deepens the connection as well. And it allows for a bit more of an open conversation because you're not going to shut down the horse's behavior. In walk, you're going to allow them to try a few things that you might not allow them to try in trot.
Mhm.
So the second one is gentle on the body. Again, this applies to riders and horses.
Now, is that for the horse or is that for the rider? But you're clarifying it's for both, yeah.
Yeah. Talking about the rider first, there are a lot of people who, especially maybe if you've had an accident or you've recently had children, which can cause problems with confidence, but also you can lose a lot of your core strength from that. People want to go back and do something meaningful with their horse, but they don't want to, or they're not able anymore to be doing a lot of sitting, trot and canter for dressage or jumping, things like that. And it can be disheartening because you can feel like, well, I don't just want to sort of pootle around. I still want to do something really meaningful. So this work is extremely meaningful for a horse working at any level. So I'd recommend this for top level show jumpers and dressage horses as well, or any other discipline that you're doing, because it impacts the quality of your work. So it's gentle on the human body. It's also gentle on the horse's body. So, for example, if a horse has had a lameness and is coming back from lameness, and you're not sure, you know that the horse needs to be exercised, but you don't want to cause them to go backwards. It's very slow. It's very low impact, unlike a trot or a canter, because there's no suspension in the walk. So there's no damage or wear and tear being caused for the walk work. And it's also, again, because of the way that we do it and we ask for a little, everything is small, so it's always less is more. So you ask for maybe a little bit of shoulder in. If the horse can't manage that, they have the opportunity to say no because you're using light aids. So you can really keep a track of what the horse can and can't manage. And as I said before, when the horse feels good in their body, they actually ask for more of it. So the horse has a little bit of ownership on what they're doing and what feels good in their body and what's benefiting their body. So it's incredibly gentle on the body, and it's incredibly good for a horse that needs to be rehabilitated, or even an older horse that needs to be exercised. My third point is, or my third benefit is creates lightness and responsiveness to aids. So I had a real rethink about aids recently because I realised that for some people, aids are seen as a motivation. So you increase the pressure of your leg aid to motivate the horse to go, and then you take the leg aid off when the horse goes to reward them for going. So the application of the leg aid needs to be strong enough that the horse kind of wants to make it stop. But I see aids in a bit of a different way. I think that if you can, and this is something that I'm also quite interested in, if you can get a horse to be motivated in the work for its own sake, then you can use an aid for a communication rather than a motivation. And that's why your aids can be much lighter.
The aids are supposed to be to communicate with the horse, but yes, sometimes it's like instead of whispering, it's shouting, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. It is super important that and I think for some people, they haven't thought about that and they do use aids as a motivation. And then for some people, they are using them as communication. So we want to use them for communication. If you use a strong aid of any sort, so people often think about rein aids as being too strong, but leg aids also can be too strong. Even a squeeze can be too strong. So if you use an aid that's strong enough to make the horse brace against it, so for example, if you use a strong spur aid and the horse braces their sides against that, that causes tension throughout the whole body. So if the horse has any tension in any part of the body, then the body doesn't work as well as a system. The muscles in the body are all linked, so they all impact one another. So when I use my leg aid, often if you watch really closely, often when you see people asking their horse to walk on, you see just a little jolt before the horse goes as the rider applies the leg, even if it's quite a light aid. For some horses, they're so sensitive that that touch of the leg causes them to brace their sides for a moment. And that impacts the transition, and it can impact the rest of the work as well, because it's causing bracing in the whole body. So with this way, beginning from the ground and showing the horse lighter aids and then even decreasing the pressure of the aid even more until you can find the point where the horse isn't quite sure whether you've asked or not, that causes the horse to relax their body physically, but it also causes the horse to listen. So I don't know, I used to be a school teacher as well, and I discovered that whispering is more effective than shouting with school children.
Yeah.
Because when you shout, they shut it out. And when you whisper, they think, what's she saying?
It's all that, like they're leaning in. Yeah.
And it creates a whole, but again, they have to be motivated. So it's the same with the horses. If you can get that motivation and then combine it with just whispering, then you have this super focused, beautiful connection where you can really influence your horse. And also we can now start to bring in the joy as well, because it's easy and you don't need to be strong or fit. And your horse doesn't need to be strong or fit to be able to move together in this beautiful, easy way. So I used to think I'm never going to be a good rider because I've got really short legs and I'm not very strong. I'm quite skinny. So I thought I'm never going to be a good rider. But actually, you can do everything with really light aids. And when you do, it's really beneficial. I actually saw there's a really wonderful para rider, Sharon Jarvis. I don't know if you've heard of her.
Okay, yeah.
In Australia. I watched her ride once at a coaches convention, and she was the most beautiful rider, and her horse just went so beautifully. And I think it was because she has very little strength in her legs, so she's had to learn to use those really light aids, and her horse, in responding to the light aids, is able to feel really free and soft and fluid because there was no bracing. And I thought, actually, we've all got a lot to learn from that. So creating that lightness and responsiveness to aids is just a really fundamental thing in French classical dressage that makes the horse go in that beautiful and more joyful way, and also just makes it nicer for everybody. So my fourth benefit, I put improves balance, posture, and self-carriage.
I'm going to say this is for both, isn't it? Because, balance, posture, self-carriage, that's what you want for both.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah. And actually, when I teach this, might sound funny, but I do teach people without the horse to walk around the arena and go through the lateral movements. And then I ask them to slow the walk, and then I ask them to slow it a bit more. And often people suddenly realise that they actually find it really hard to walk slow, and they find it hard to balance doing the lateral movements in a slow walk. Because when you're walking slowly, you have to pause as you transfer the weight. So if you're trotting, and we see this a lot with horses trained using other methods, that when you're trotting, often someone will say, come on, ride him forwards and he'll get straighter. And even our scales of training sort of say that. I think we have, can't remember the exact terminology, but straightness comes quite far up after some of the others. And I think the problem is that when you ride the horse forward to create straightness, what you're actually doing is using momentum to help the horse to travel more straight, but you're not addressing the underlying issues which are causing the horse to be crooked. So every horse is like a person, usually right or left-handed. So horses are usually left bent or right bent just naturally. And when we train them, we try to start to straighten them out a little bit so that they can carry us more efficiently and more healthily. But if you have a horse that is left bent and you correct their crookedness, so a left bent horse will tend to fall out on the left rein and then fall in on the right rein. So often if you're on the right rein and the horse is falling in and you are trotting, you might use more inside leg to push the horse out and ask the horse to go a little bit more forward. And you'll see a horse that looks a little bit straighter, but you haven't actually addressed the crookedness in their body. You're just kind of holding them there with your inside leg. So you haven't actually created self-carriage there or corrected the underlying problem. You might see a little bit of an improvement, but the problem's always going to be there. But what we do with this walk method is that we will come back in the walk, we will slow the walk on the right rein, and we'll start to ask the horse to do exercises which ask them to bend just a tiny bit to the right. So what we're wanting to do is to stretch the muscles along the left side of the horse because they're contracted and that's what's causing the crookedness. So on the right rein, we would start with a little bit of leg yield to give them the idea of moving away, and then we'd ask for just a tiny bit of shoulder in or even shoulder forward, just as much as the horse can manage. And what will usually happen if you've already connected and slowed the horse is that when you first ask, they'll hesitate. So this is another reason why we don't push them on and ask them to go, because as they hesitate, they're feeling in their body, this feels different. So you allow them to experience that, and then they'll relax a little. Those muscles on the outside will stretch just a little, and they'll discover that they can bend a little bit in this direction that they haven't been able to bend before. And then you allow them to stretch. And during that time, they process. And then you pick up and ask again. And the second time, they feel a little bit more confident. And they say, oh, yeah, okay, that felt good last time. Let's try again.
Yeah.
And then you gradually sort of build it up. So it's also, I could give endless examples and I'm not going to get carried away. But you can also
we can always come back for another chat. Let's just do the 5 for now. But yes, we can always chat about it some more. And I'm sure there's lots of variations. Diana, each time you come on, it's not the same thing, just again and again. You're always bringing something interesting and different. And I think that just shows, wide experience, and it gives our listeners, just the ability to go through and do a search to do something, about. They can search for walk and your name's going to come up, just to do a search on Horse Chats, that is. Yeah, so it's great that you're doing this big variety of stuff. So, yeah. Anyway, keep going because we want to hear about the last one. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that on what you just said, for me, the horse is my teacher. So I've got lots of wonderful teachers. I've had wonderful teachers right from the start. All types of different teachers that have taught me all different things. But the horse is the one that gives me the honest feedback as to what does and doesn't work.
And different every time.
Next year, I'll probably have something completely different that I'm talking about as well. But there are some of these things which just sort of build and grow. But yeah, so going back to finishing off that 4th point, what I was just going to say was that we talked about the straightness and the self-carriage a little bit. And self-carriage is one of those things which some people are a little confused about what it really means. For me, it just means the horse being able to carry themselves. So being able to move without the support of a rider's leg or a rider's hand holding them in a certain way. So for that, it doesn't necessarily mean that the horse is beautifully on the bit or going in an advanced train, but it does mean that I want this right from the very start. So whatever you're asking the horse to do is something that they're able to do and something that they can do by themselves, which is hugely beneficial for their confidence as well. So we talked about the straightness and the self-carriage, but also I just wanted to do a quick word about the vertical balance as well and the vertical alignment. So I believe it's really important for horses to learn to come off the forehand in order to carry a rider, because I liken it to when you start a new job and it's a job that involves heavy lifting, hopefully you get taught how to lift correctly. So you get taught to bend the knees and keep the back straight, and that protects you from injury. And you learn that before you even start. But I think it's funny, often in riding, when we start a young horse, we get on it without having taught at all how to come off the forehand. And being on the forehand puts a huge amount of pressure on the joints of front legs and on the horse's body in general, and it creates wear and tear right from the very start. So I teach the horse, as part of the in-hand work, I teach the horse to begin to come off the forehand. So I do that in the same sort of way. So often things like shoulder in create a natural position in bringing the inside hind under the centre of balance, naturally brings the weight back a little bit. And in order to carry out that movement, the horse discovers that they need to lift and come off the forehand. In order for that to happen, they also need to be soft through their whole body. And we often see a lot of tension in the horse's neck area and the muscles of the neck. So I do use touch as well in halts to begin with. I touch and massage very gently, fingertip massage the neck and find the areas that are hard and tense, and I'll bend the horse a little towards me, just a fraction. So it's all very, very subtle until I feel a release. So that right from the beginning, I can then start to use the shouldering and especially the rein back as well to bring the horse up off the forehand, which is what I'm talking about when I talk about balance. So the fifth and final point is that it makes impactful and lasting improvements to straightness and alignment, creating a horse that is more healthy, happy, strong, and forward. So I suppose in a way that's really a summary of all the points that go before. But there's so many examples that I've noticed from doing this work with my horses or horses that have been in my care. I've leased a few horses and helped other people or trained other people's horses. And some of the things that I've come across is horses with I worked with an old horse that had a very saggy back, probably due to Cushing's. He had a lot of muscle wastage. So some might call it a sway back, but I'm not sure whether that would be the official diagnosis. But he had a very saggy back and probably was developing kissing spines. And I did in-hand work with him for a month, and the back straightened out very dramatically. But the interesting thing was that when I stopped working with him, and he's retired now, he maintained the correct alignment in his back.
Good.
We never
Good.
That's just one. There's lots of examples I've got examples of horses that have become, they were very crooked in the hind end. I've got a mare who had quite bad cow hops and also very asymmetrical. She actually straightened out within a week. And the problem was really caused by tension in her hamstrings, I think, but also really linked to tension in her neck muscles. And she had some issues with her hooves previous to that, which had made her move in quite a defensive way. So when I showed her how to move correctly, immediately she felt the benefit in her body, and she then chose to move that way. That's what I mean when I say that the improvements are long lasting. Once a horse feels the benefit in their body, they choose to continue to move in that way. But also, I don't compete. But if you are wanting a better performance from your horse, the fact that they are aligned correctly and moving correctly in their body is really fundamental to improving that performance. So going back to the example of the lazy horse, I always liken it to a garden hose that has a kink in it. So if you turn on the water a little bit, it won't go through because it's blocked by the kink. So you could turn on the water really hard and it might burst through and straighten the kink, and then the water will come through. That would be similar to trotting a horse more forward to get them straight. But what I actually do is I unkink the hose first. So in the slow walk, I realign the body, and there's not going to be any pain or discomfort while I'm doing that because the horse is not trying to push into something that's crooked. So if I have a horse that's crooked and I ask them to push more with the hind leg, but the front end is crooked, that means the energy can't really flow. The spine is not aligned and the energy can't really flow through, so it can get stuck. And if you really keep pushing, the horse will try their hardest and they'll really push with their hind legs and they'll try to go more forward. And they may sort of get to feel a little bit straighter, like the hose of the kink where you blew the water through. Yeah, potentially might even solve the problem doing that. But you do risk causing damage along the way, and you will tend to get a horse, if they've experienced pain through being pushed when there's a blockage, they will get that kind of lazy mindset. Whereas if you allow the horse to flow right down and you unkink the hose and you straighten until everything lines up, then they discover that we're talking about in terms of left and right straightness, as well as in terms of coming off the forehand and dropping the haunches. So once all of the balance is just right and everything lines up, all you need to do is release. And it's such a beautiful feeling because the first time you release a horse into trot that was previously lazy and slow, you've straightened them up using all the walk work, and then you ask them to trot and they realize that they can move, and you just see this beautiful, and it really is impulsion, and it makes you realize what impulsion really is, because the impulsion is coming from the energy just flowing through in perfect alignment through the whole of the horse. So the horse moves as one beautiful flowing unit that all moves in sync.
I love the way that you explained that with the hose, the kink in the hose and getting rid of the kink. Don't just turn the hose on and force your way through, but let's just get that sorted first. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Diana, how can people learn more about this?
So if you go to my website, www.thepowerofwalk.com, or you can visit my Facebook page, which is Diana Waters Responsive Equine, or my YouTube channel. And on Facebook and YouTube, I've got a lot of free resources, which just give you an idea of some of the things I do. So you can see some videos which show me working with various horses. And I've also got some short educational videos which explain how to do some of those things.
Now, Diana, your YouTube channel, is that Diana Waters or Responsive Equine?
Responsive Equine. Yeah.
And we'll make sure that we get the correct details as well. We'll put them down the bottom of the page, and that'll be at horsechats.com. It'll be /Diana Waters, whatever chat we're up to. But if people want to know more, they can search horsechats.com for either Diana or Waters, and they'll come up with all those chats. But before we finish, Diana, what else haven't I asked you about using walk or French classical dressage? Is there anything else that you'd like to say as a bit of a summary?
I think people are very afraid of the walk.
Definitely, because we're always taught to just move the horse forward, get the trot established, get the canter going, and don't interrupt with the walk. And I think that's more the tenseness in the walk. You know, you're trying to push the horse in walk too much and they end up getting a lateral gait, or, you know, they're pacing. It just doesn't work. But the way you've explained it here, you're not saying, let's get the walk and push it along and try for an extended walk before the horse is ready. You're saying, no, we're getting rid of the tension and we're doing, it's different training in the walk that you're talking about, not just the normal, let's get the walk moving and let's get it going quickly. Mm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that I was taught, don't work the walk because you can ruin it. And once you ruin the walk, it's very difficult to get it back. It's like you were saying about if you create tension in the walk, you can create a lateral walk, which is very bad. I think the most important thing, if you are trying this at home, is to let go of the idea of pushing from leg to hand, because that's where you can start to get those problems, such as a lateral walk. This walk work is about removing all of the aids first, and you only use leg without hand or hand without leg. You don't use the two together, and all of the aids need to be light. So I always say, if you discover or if you find that suddenly you notice that there's some leaning, you can feel a horse leaning on your hands, or you notice that your leg aids have got stronger, I always say, remove your aids and go, don't worry that that's happened, because it will happen. We're all human. But remove your aids and go back to synchronization. So go back to moving with the horse without influencing them. And then from that synchronization, you can start to ask for things again. But the walk must never be held. Even when you're asking for the walk to slow down, some horses aren't comfortable with slowing the walk yet, in which case you allow them to go whatever speed they want. You can suggest for them to slow down every so often, but if they don't want to, you don't force them to and you don't hold them there. Everything has to be with the horse's consent and in a way that makes the horse feel comfortable. And then you absolutely can't ruin anything if you work in that way.
All right. Now, just to do with your contact, if people would like to contact you, we've talked about your Facebook and your YouTube channel, but they can contact you through there. Is that the best way, or would you like me to record your email and phone on the page as well?
Yeah, I've got a number of different emails, so I'm struggling to think which one to give you, but maybe I'll just give you those details and you can put them on the page.
Perfect. We'll do that. All right, Diana, again, thank you very much. Thank you for your chat. Thank you for bringing in all of these extra bits and expertise into the channel. So thanks very much, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this chat, then please comment, rate and subscribe. If you'd like any changes or recommendations for guests, then please contact us through horsechats.com. And while you're online, have a look at the government-accredited courses at internationalhorsecollege.com. Registered Training Organisation 31352.
Remember that our comments and instructions are general in nature and do not take into consideration your individual horses or your individual ability and circumstances. If you enjoyed this podcast, then please leave your comment below.